a moment. There we are. All right. Hi. If you don't know me, I'm one of the seniors here at Pathway. Thank you. I've been going to Pathway basically my entire life. Just grew up in the church, and so I did not have a great middle school, high school experience. You might not know that about me, because I tended to come off very confident, very put together, when that was absolutely not the case. And my life has completely flipped upside down in the past few months. So many changes. And so I kind of felt like this was something worth sharing, and I felt like God was calling me to share. And so I asked Ben if he had any chance for me to share, because I only have a few months left here. And so this is technically week 1 of our senior nights. So I'm sharing my testimony this week, and we have a Q&A next week. So if you have any questions about my testimony, you can ask them then. And come back next week to be able to talk to more of the seniors. I know Jade is so excited about it, and a big part of my testimony revolves around mental health. And it was just, growing up in the church, I always felt like it was something that wasn't talked about. It was something that was definitely stigmatized. And like as teens, we're all going to struggle with something like that. It's like physical health. You're going to sprain an ankle sometime in your life. You can't get around it. And it's the same with mental health. You're going to get stressed. You're going to have something like that. Sometimes it goes a little bit farther. And so, without further ado, here's my testimony. So, as I just said, grew up in the church, grew up in Pathway. I've been here forever. I've been here since this was here and not upstairs, the beginning when this was here. So grew up in Pathway, accepted Christ really young age, just like most people who grew up in the church. The only problem about my childhood is I don't remember most of it. So all I can tell you is that I know I had a good childhood, and I know that I was a little bit of a problem child, as Alec laughs. But I mean, my parents are great. My parents are great. They handled me as best they could, but I was a little bit of a wild child, but an all-around good kid. I was just labeled the loud, bossy one, which makes sense after all that's happened to me. So middle school is where problems started happening. And I mean, everyone here has got their middle school problems. It's middle school, there's going to be problems. But I just remember in 6th grade, I had one friend. And I just remember not being able to make friends, not being able to, I was so shy, if that's surprising, which it is. I just did not talk to anyone except for my one friend. And I was like 11, and I just remember being so lonely, like unrealistically lonely for how young I was. Then we got to 7th grade, and things didn't really change. I remember, this is my first sad memory I'll share with you guys. I remember going to 7th grade fall retreats, and it was the last morning, it was Sunday morning. And I remember crying to my small group leader because I didn't feel like waking up in the mornings anymore. So that's a sad memory, but that's kind of the basis of my middle school experience. It was not fun. Over that summer I found friends and I lost them, which led to just a bunch of doubting, doubting if I could ever make those connections, and if I did, would I ever like, keep them? 8th grade, last year of middle school, can't remember any of it, so we're gonna skip right over that. When I was in middle school, I always thought that high school was going to be a place where things started to get better. They didn't, plot twist. So my 9th grade year went a lot like my 6th grade year. Just not many friends, not much of anything. Just like a lot of loneliness, a lot of just sadness. And when I got into high school, I'd been homeschooled my entire life. And I switched to cyber school, which some people think that's no big change, it's fine. But there's the pressure of like a real grading system, which did not help anything. So I had the pressure of, hey, look, you get real grades. You have to be in this schooling system that you've never done before. You have to upkeep everything. You have to stay on top of everything. I was in sports a lot, so I had to do sports and just everything just got super busy. And then December of my freshman year, things started getting really bad, and I ended up with an eating disorder. And that kind of carried through almost my entire high school career, which is not something you would guess about me, because the stereotypes around eating disorders is she's thin, she's gonna look thin, and I did not. So nobody really was worried about me, which wasn't good, but at the same time, it caused me to keep hiding things. And just, I had never really opened up to anybody about anything. I kept it all bottled in, just hid behind this facade that, oh, look, I'm confident, I'm good, don't check out, I'm good, I'm fine. And so that carried throughout 9th grade, 10th grade. I tried to get better. I had incentives to get better. I really, really wanted to get better, but that wasn't realistic for me. This was the year I really started noticing that I was struggling in school, and I had all these people tell me like, "Oh, you're so smart. You're a smart kid," and I was like, "But I don't think I'm smart. Stop telling me I'm smart. I'm not." And just people were telling me who I was, and I wasn't seeing it. And I was like, am I actually that, or am I so good at lying that people actually think I'm these things? Like, is this gonna be the rest of my life, hiding behind this person I made up to be so that nobody checks in on me? Upperclassmen years. Yeah. As bad, not as bad. Life hasn't been bad. It's just been complicated. Junior year, everything kind of hit all at once. Most of my memory comes from this point on, which have a lot more things to share now. 11th grade was, I can definitely label it as the worst year of my entire life. Fall of 2019 was honestly something I did not think I would get past. Glad I did. However, so going into that year, we had the Panama trip before that, which just kind of shows how long ago that was. Not that long, it was a little long ago. Anyways, we had that Panama trip, got back from the Panama trip, and my mom had started to notice that things were bad. Things were getting bad enough that it was shining through cracks in the armor I had put on. And so we got back from that Panama trip, and I remember just feeling terrible, just about everything, and just was not in a good place. And my mom started noticing, and she decided to get me to therapy for the first time. That did not end well. We tried this therapist, and I remember it was a male therapist, and going to a male therapist for an eating disorder is absolutely embarrassing. It was the most embarrassing thing ever. And I remember it being so awkward. Like all of the stereotypes you could have about a Christian therapist, it was that. And I just remember suffering through that hour, like, when is this gonna be over? And the cherry on top of that entire cake is when he told me that my eating disorder, my depression came from the fact that I wasn't praying enough. Yeah, I didn't go back to therapy for a long time. And even now, I have problems with male therapists. It's not a fun time. So that kind of, in the midst of things escalating and getting worse, that kind of just pushed me into a deeper, darker hole. And I started wondering, like, okay, is it because I'm a bad Christian that this is bad, that I'm like not good at like living? And like, is all of my problems coming from I'm not a good Christian? And those thoughts just kept circling in my head. And like I prayed, I went to youth group, I went to church. I thought I had a great relationship with God, but I just kept wondering, like, okay, like, does God hate me? Does he? And so like church wasn't fun for a bit there. I got into junior year school year. So all that happened around August of that year. Got into my real junior year of school and all. And things kept going downhill. And that fall was the first time I remember like being like, okay, I don't need this anymore. Like everything. And I remember in the midst of all that, Ben had us share our testimonies from Panama in front of the entire youth group. And if anyone remembers my old testimony, throw it out the window because it was all lies. I found it in my Bible. Like, I was cleaning a few weeks ago and I found it and just, oh my gosh. It was a part of the armor I put on. And I dove so many lies in that. But I mean, that's kind of what I did so that people didn't see me as someone who's weak. I always wanted to look strong. And that was also the fall. So I'm a competitive gymnast. Gymnastics has been my life, my safe spot. But that fall, I tried quitting gym and I sat down with my head coach. And I was like, hey, look, I don't think this is something I want to continue doing. Like, I think I'm done. And she looked at me, she was like, no, you're not. And I was like, okay. And so honestly, I think that was one of the first signs for me to keep going and to like keep trying. So thankful to my coach for that one. And then that November, I got baptized because I really did want to be that good Christian girl. And like, I don't regret getting baptized because I honestly do think I had good intentions behind it. But there was also some lies there. And I remember when I got baptized, I was like God showing me like better things. And I was not seeing better things, but I really wanted to. So I regret some of the things I said during that time in order to make myself look put together, but I don't regret getting baptized. I don't regret going through that time in my life because it gave me a lot of good things and it taught me a lot of good lessons. So we got through that fall, that winter. And right when things were getting good, I think everybody knows what happened. The pandemic hit. So right when like I was making friends, I was doing so well, I was like finally figuring things out, I had to be trapped at home. with nothing to do. And I was like, it's time, I'll turn my life around. I'll like have that quarantine glow up. Yeah, it was rough. That's all I can say about it. I tried to fix myself, which is never a good thing. I didn't ask for help when I really needed it. So a lot of things were bad. Almost didn't finish that school year. I almost failed junior year. Glad I didn't. But, and then my eating disorder was rampant. I was just stuck inside this bubble of everything sucks. And everything did suck. It wasn't just teenage angst. I was literally stuck in this life and in this person that I didn't want to be. And then I started senior year. And up until that point, we were coming back from that like lockdown period. I mean, we're still in a pandemic, but there was that lockdown period. We were coming out of that. Gym, absolutely. All sports are gonna suck if you take 3 months off of them, but gymnastics is a whole nother level. And that was another time I almost quit, because gymnastics is really hard, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's really hard, and sometimes it sucks, and coming back from quarantine is when it sucked. So that put a strain on things. Kind of wondering, is things ever going to get back to normal? Not even socially and in our world, but like personally, are things, like I'm taking hit after hit and nothing's getting better? Is this just how life is? Like I'm at gym, I'm just gonna take hit after hit until I get to heaven. And so 12th grade, I had written down 12th grade, senior year started, and that is this school year, is honestly where everything that has happened to me in the past was pointing to. Over quarantine, we started looking for a therapist again. We, as in like, my parents were trying to find one for me. There was a lot of dead ends there, but it worked out. So like 12th senior year, to preface everything that happened in senior year, I started it and everything still sucked. And I remember applying to college and thinking, I do not, like, the rest of my life is going to start happening. And that scared the absolute crap out of me. And I was like, how am I going to live the rest of my life like this? Like, I kind of pushed off the idea that, like, all the years that I lived were just kind of like an interlude to real life. And I was like, if I can barely survive this, how am I surviving adulthood? I'm not. So that kind of was my breaking point, not in a bad way, but it was a breaking point through that arbor that I finally knew that was the time I needed to get help. I needed to, like, I couldn't keep this up any longer. Like, this was going to kill me if I kept it up. And so after quarantine, everyone was trying to get a therapist. And I know a lot of people point to quarantine as as the issue on why everybody was starting to like try to find therapists. But honestly, quarantine kind of just brought out underlying issues. And I do not regret lockdown ever, because I know that if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have asked for help as soon as I did. So then I tried to find a therapist, and they were all booked because everybody wanted a therapist. And I feel so bad. If you know a therapist friend, if like your mom is a friend who's a therapist, thank them, because they're all booked and it's rough out there. I did like 3 intakes And an intake is when, we had to do it over Zoom or like over phone call, but it's when you basically call into the therapist office and they like ask you what's wrong with you. And you kind of just had to tell them what was all going on, which was really frustrating because I was reliving everything that was wrong with me over and over and over again just to find someone who will help fix those things, and nobody could fix those things. So we were just like, my family and I were just so frustrated that like nothing was working. And finally, God brought a little miracle along. My mom had a friend who was in therapy, and I guess my mom's friend mentioned to her therapist that she had a friend who was looking for a therapist for her daughter, which is a lot of different connections. If you can keep up, good for you. But he said he was mentoring a Christian therapist who was a woman. And she had openings because she was just like a new therapist. And so we applied, and that's where I met my absolute godsend, Kathy. I love Kathy. My small group, we're all on first name basis with Kathy in our small group. I love her. So if you hadn't caught on, that's my therapist's name. Love her. Wonderful woman. So I got into therapy that fall, and it was not a fix-all type of problem-solving thing. And there's a lot of stereotypes surrounding therapy and what that entails. And let me tell you, Kathy does have a couch, but it looks like one of those Target home goods sections. Very millennial Christian white woman. Love her, but I definitely feel like I'm in Target most of the time. But therapy, especially for me, it involves a lot of talking things out and talking through things that she told me was trauma when I didn't even realize it was trauma. And as a society, we don't like to use the word trauma a lot because we think of like fighting in war and or losing a loved one. But that is not what a lot of my trauma looks like. Trauma can also mean growing up with undiagnosed mental illness and like really sucky relationships. So it was a lot of talking through that. It's a lot of like coping mechanisms. And I could go through that, but I have another section that I'm talking about therapy. So I'll move on. That fall, even with a therapist, even with trying to get better, it still sucked. I don't know why, but the fall has just always been absolutely terrible for me. My eating disorder got better, to the point where it wasn't active, but I still hated everything about myself. I just hated how I looked. And I still couldn't understand why. I was trying to get better. I was asking for help. I was being so open to everyone, and I couldn't. Nothing was working. And then God gave me a miracle in the form of an Instagram post. And I know that sounds weird, but I swear it was my little miracle. That Instagram post was an infographic about ADHD symptoms. And I read that and I went, that's just a little too relatable to be comfortable anymore. And of course, the algorithm in these social media pages, I saw one, and all of a sudden they were everywhere. And I was like, I was saving them left and right. And I was like, this is not okay. That like they're stalking me. I think they're stalking me. This is a cruel joke, isn't it? So I asked my mom if I could go get diagnosed. And she allowed me to talk some crap about her. Not crap. Sorry, Mom. I know you're watching this. Hi. Not, we've gone on this journey together. I love my mom. She's walked alongside me all of these years and really had really good intentions. However, sometimes not the greatest execution. I asked her to go get diagnosed with ADHD, and she straight up told me, no, I know people who have ADHD, and you can drive. So I was like, what? Yeah, I can drive. What does that have to do with anything? Okay. And she's like, no, people with ADHD, they can't drive. It's like, what? Okay. And I took it to my dad, and he just went, oh, no, that's normal. Which is red flags right there. You'll find out in a sec. But I waited several months to get diagnosed, and again with therapists, the psych people who like diagnose you are absolutely booked. So I took some time, but February 2021, I did a little Zoom call, and I finally got diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety, and everything made so much sense. I did so much research before and after, and it was kind of just like that final puzzle piece just like clicking in. And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I can finally get better. And when I got diagnosed, the lady who diagnosed me, she was like, hey, you're in therapy, that's awesome, but the number one way to treat ADHD is through medication. And there's a lot of stigma around medication, especially those involving ADHD, because that is a type of substance that other people get addicted to. So they were like, you sure you want to do this? And I was like, absolutely, put me on all the drugs. I don't care, get me better. And so I got some prescriptions, and what I like to tell people is that my life started on February 27th, 2021, because that was the first day of medication. And I think even everybody sitting here in this room can tell a difference. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Especially my close friends can tell a huge difference in everything, just everything. And ADHD medication, unlike depression and anxiety medication, they don't take like several weeks to kick in. So I took it that first day, and like I cleaned my room like top to bottom in like 3 hours. Which that was a little weird, but things fell in place. And I can honestly say I am now happier than I've literally ever felt. I feel heard, I feel seen, I feel like I'm now the person that when I was in middle school laying in bed, I was like, this, if I wanted to be someone, it would be this. And I feel like I'm finally heard. And obviously, that type of change in that short of time doesn't come without some bad side effects. In church, we learn about lamenting, and I know we've done some stuff here in youth group about lamenting, but definitely that first month, especially the first like week and a half, it was really tough. Like I could finally do things, and I was on that high of, hey, look, I can actually get school done. I feel like somebody has like lifted my head out of water. But then again, what could have happened if we had caught this sooner? Like how would my life have gone if we had caught this when I was like 10, 11, 12? Who would I be? Who would I look like? What would my life look like? Because the changes I've had in the past few months, if I had several years of that, I don't even know where I would be at. And to get diagnosed and get medicated 3 months before the end of your senior year, you miss out on a lot. I always acted like college was the beginning. like I would get to college and everything would be fine. And that was unrealistic because obviously I would get to college and I wouldn't have been fine. But to go through these changes and finally feel like high school was fun and like gymnastics was fun and that like it wasn't something I just wanted to check off the list of things I could just had to get over with. Like I finally felt like this was it. Like I could experience and not just suffer through. So I had to kind of lament that little girl who thought that everything was wrong with her and she was gonna have to deal with it. And I had to come to terms that ADHD is a lifelong thing. It started when I was born, it'll end when I die. It's not something that can get healed. It's not something that's ever going to get healed. It's a whoa, that's a long word. Neurodevelopmental disorder. So yeah, my brain is basically not normal for life. That's what it means. In less words than it actually means. But so this is a lifelong thing, and coming to terms with that, it wasn't as scary as you would think, because ADHD is what's known as like a good diagnosis. My life would have turned out so much worse if I didn't get diagnosed. So it was positive and not negative. And with that, that's the end of my testimony. And for the next just few minutes, I'm just going to talk about, I have this section labeled Mental Health Healing and Stigma. I swear it's less schooly than it sounds. So this second half of what I'm doing, it's less about me particularly and more about what in the world, how does mental health affect everything? And to answer some questions that might be lingering up in your head. So to start off, so ADHD, I know a lot of people might have these stereotypical ADHD stuck in their head, and to kind of clear up what exactly is ADHD, it's short for attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and that is not the correct name. They should change that name because when you hear that, and when you hear that somebody has ADHD, you immediately think of a little boy running around and not being able to sit still. And obviously, I'm not a little boy running around and not being able to sit still. So there's a lot of stereotypes surrounding that, and all I can say about ADHD is that I literally can't function when I'm off meds. It's bad. It affects just being able to put your focus on something, even as simple as like, I was not able to upkeep conversations enough to have friendships. I was not able, in sports, I was not able to put my focus on, let's say, a 100-meter dash long enough for it to be a good 100-meter dash. I was not able to put my focus on a floor routine long enough for it to be a floor routine that was worthy enough for a good score. And then with hyperactivity, it wasn't, hey, look, I'm running around, I can't sit still, don't tell me to sit down. It was, hey, I'm gonna talk a lot. And you're gonna think that's normal because I'm bossy. But in reality, I just can't shut up, like, chronically. So there's a lot of stereotypes surrounding that, and I can't even begin to explain the depths of it. But ADHD falls under the bubble of neurodivergency. And that sounds like a very fantasy novel type thing. I swear it's not. The bubble of neurodivergency covers all mental disorders that have been there since birth. So we have like ADHD falls under that, autism, OCD, there's a couple. But they all fall under that little bubble. And the thing about that bubble is you wouldn't know, but all of them share a lot of symptoms. So, like, I have a lot of symptoms of an autistic person. A person with autism could have a lot of symptoms of ADHD. I have OCD symptoms. A person with OCD could have a lot of ADHD symptoms. We all just kind of like hand the baton over to one another in those things. But mental health is just wacky. And sometimes you don't even know how it all connects, but it does. It's weird. But again, with the stereotypes of some of this like ADHD stuff, the problem with the ADHD symptom of the little boy who just can't sit still is most of the people with ADHD are not little boys who can't sit still, and I can say that from experience. My 55-year-old dad, sorry for name dropping, Dad, not name dropping, age dropping. My 55-year-old dad, who got diagnosed 2 months after me. He's not a little boy who can't sit still anymore. Anymore. But that's another thing that I like to include in my testimony. My dad has it, and throughout this journey, we figured out that parts of my mom's side have it. So it's all genetic, it's all passed down, but I'm the trendsetter. Just let me put that in there. So with medication, we're gonna touch on this a little bit. I'd like to touch on how has life changed since I got diagnosed. Friendships, I'm able to talk to more people and talk to people I haven't been able to, and connect with people I thought I'd never be able to, which is wild. Because the people I thought hated me didn't hate me. I was just kind of off the rails at some points. And then family, my family and I are like closer than ever. Sports, I got really good at gym. That sounds suspicious at points, but I swear like it was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. Being able to appreciate ending gymnastics on a note that was better than I've ever done, and be able to end that section of my life fully satisfied that I had done everything I could. And then myself, talk to any of my close friends. They can tell you I've very much so changed. Mentally, physically, emotionally, it's been a good time. And so my next little section is, stop looking at the time, Luke. There you go. I'll speed through these last couple minutes. Don't worry, we'll get you out of your time. We'll get you out of your time. I'm a fast talker. So, yeah, you are. Growing up undiagnosed in the church, was very harmful, and we as a church, we need to do better, because as I was growing up with these mental disorders that I had no idea about, I always thought I was doing something wrong. And we're always told about, casting your fears and anxieties on the Lord, like do this, do that. I always felt like I was a bad Christian because I couldn't. Like I couldn't cast my fears and anxieties on the Lord, because my fears and anxieties were literally every single part of my life. And I couldn't understand how people felt God so intensely, because I always felt like I was just doing something wrong. I felt like there you go. All right, there you go. I always felt like people had some extra pages in their Bible that like allowed them like a head start in life. And I never felt like I could speak up about it, because I always felt like people would just like, it would show how bad a Christian I was if I spoke up about what was going on inside my head. And so, let's see. So, what can we do as a church to be better? So what I'm trying to do, and what I wanted to do by standing up here and telling you guys all about the bad parts of my life, is make it a normal conversation in the church. We really don't talk about it. We like to stand up here and like talk about really good things. Like we talk about really good things in this youth group, and I appreciate all the things discussed in this youth group, but it's kind of left out. And it's such a big part of our teenage years that it's not something that should be left out. And just being aware of hidden illnesses and hidden disabilities. Like you can't look at someone and immediately tell everything that's wrong with them just by looking at them. And I mean, this is true for all of society right now, but look outside yourself. Like take some time, learn about other people. It's not just normal people everywhere in the world. You're gonna have to face people that you haven't before. And you're gonna face people that you haven't before that maybe you don't even know, because you can't guess those things. So really quickly, we're gonna talk about how to like help yourself and help others in mental illness. So I mean, all of us here are gonna struggle with mental stuff sooner or later. It's inevitable, but there's a difference between normal mental struggles versus like illnesses, disorders. For instance, like it's normal to worry about a test, but if you literally can't do schoolwork because you're frozen by anxiety, there's probably something wrong. And I mean, sometimes we're just not taught enough about these types of things to know when is it a good time to ask for help. But something I've learned in the past couple months is even if you don't think you have something wrong with you, you can ask for help. Like it's actually pretty easy. And it took me like 18 years to learn that. You can ask for help even if you don't think you need it, you don't think you deserve it. And if you're like sitting here and you're like, okay, maybe I'm not struggling with something like this, but I know my best friend, my brother, my sister, this person I know, and on my sport team, they are. Like, what do I do to help? And I think the biggest thing I wish somebody had done for me was just let them talk. Just be someone that they can lean on, and don't push them to just tell you anything they don't want to, but just be there for them. However, if hard things come up, tell a trusted adult, bring it to a trusted adult, because you'd rather have a friend be mad at you for a few years than have to attend a funeral. So, and so wrapping this thing up, in conclusion, we can do better as a church. I personally would love to hear your story if you're struggling and you want someone to talk to and you have questions on what the heck is going on in my brain and what do I need to do. I would love to answer questions. However, if you have like just like big general questions, those can be said at the Q&A panel next week. And now, I mean, Ben, if you want small groups for a few minutes.
Why don't you close the prayer and then I'll...
Close and, okay. Well, I'm gonna close with some prayer, and then Ben has a plan, because Ben always has a plan. So, bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for this time just to share and to talk, and to be open. Please help anybody in this room who's just struggling. Help them know that they can't ask for help, and they deserve to ask for help, and that you love them even if it feels like you're miles away. And please help us as a church do better in this kind of way. We love you and need you. Amen.
Amen. Yeah, go ahead. You're First of all, Andrew, just thank you for sharing your story and being that vulnerable with us. And I don't know, we appreciate it. Or at least I appreciate it. So, yes. But to that point, just to kind of close things down, and then we do have some time for small groups at the end here. Honestly, I mean, Ambry does a good nudge in the right direction for us. Of like the church historically has not done a great job of talking about mental health and talking about the challenges of it and the reality of it. So we just want to open the door to any of you to say, hey, if there's something that you're struggling with, if there's maybe you need more than just like a person to talk to, maybe you need a therapist, maybe you need some medication, something like that. One, like you can let me know, this is my background. I have a psychology, or I majored in psychology in school. I didn't major in ministry. So like I know a little bit of this world and like I'm comfortable conversing in it and all that. I'm not a trained counselor, but I can at least get you started. And we can push you in the right direction. So something that I care about, something Emery cares about, her mom cares a whole lot about as well. So if you're like, oh, I want to talk to, maybe there's some parents in here that maybe want to like talk to Mrs. Jerome here and get some insight into how she handled things or whatever. But just open the conversation, start the conversation, because it is important to talk about. It's important to ask those questions, to hear some answers. Maybe some things that you want to hear, maybe some things you don't want to hear, but to be able to do the hard work of stepping into that space and just being fully honest about like what's going on in your heart, in your mind, and in your head, and all that kind of stuff. Getting it out there to somebody who's going to be able to walk you through some things is very important and very helpful. So with that, we're going to dismiss you to your small groups, and you got like 15, 20 minutes, so have fun. That's a great question. How many of us are you? Well, yeah, follow Trent. Hey, Trent, let's go with Sam. And, yeah, there you go. So we'll follow Trent.
I mean, the first one I've been to, it was fun. It was the New Galilee Fireball.